with Susan and Lucy. We are so honored and excited to have as our guest at the table Secretary Leon Panetta. He had so many titles in his life of public service: Secretary of Defense, CIA Director when we took down Osama bin Laden, White House Chief of Staff, Director of OMB, a Representative of Congress from California, and a Calabrese. So welcome. Yes, exactly. So welcome, Mr. Secretary, and thank you so much for being with us. I'm going to turn it over to Lucy because I know you two have been lifelong friends, and then she'll take it from here.
Great.
Well, thank you very much. Yes, welcome, Leon, Mr. Secretary, but it's okay, I'll call you Leon.
You got it. Please.
As we begin, I just want to make sure that you are aware, and our audience, that we are the American Italian Food Coalition, and we're made up of 450 Italian companies, trade associations, manufacturers that export food to the United States so that American consumers can enjoy affordable, good food. And so that's what we do. And we are so glad that you're here. And I'm thinking about all the list of things that Susan described about your incredible career. This says that you are devoted to public service. And of course, that's so true of your institute. And these values that you bring, do you think it has anything to do with your Italian American roots? And while we're at it, can you also tell us what's your story? What, how,
Well, thanks to both you, Lucy, and Susan. Good friends. It's really great to join you. And it's great to be able to talk about a topic that all of us really embrace, which is our Italian heritage. So that's wonderful. I know you're involved with food. Let me just tell you one story that I remember when I first got elected in 1976. And I walked on the floor of the House, and an Italian congressman from Chicago came up to me, and Frank Annunzio, you probably remember Frank Annunzio. Frank Annunzio said, Panetta, that's Italian, right? I said, yes, it is. He says, good. He says, because we want you to be a member of the Italian caucus. And I said, absolutely. I was not going to say no to an Italian from Chicago. He said, that's good. He says, I wanted to tell you something. We don't do much on issues, but we eat good.
And you said, I'm in.
I'm in. It's a great story.
It's great
story. You know, I'm the son, obviously, of Italian immigrants. My parents both came from Calabria in the early 30s, like millions of others. My dad had come over. Actually, he was in World War I and then came over to join several brothers. He was the 13th in his family, and he came over, made it to California, and then went back to Italy, married my mother, and they both came in the early 30s. And fortunately, you know, the tradition was you visit your older brother first. Well, his older brother, Bruno, lived in Sheridan, Wyoming. And he had another brother, Tony, who lived in California. So they visited the older brother and spent one winter in Sheridan, Wyoming. And my mother said, you know, I think it's time to visit your other brother, Tony. And they did. Made it to California again and made it to Monterey, where I was born and raised. My father opened a restaurant in downtown Monterey during the war years. My earliest recollections were standing on a chair in the back of that restaurant washing glasses. My parents believed child labor was a requirement. So I remember that restaurant. My father was the chef. My mother handled the cash register. She had a little button underneath the cash register because there were a lot of soldiers in Monterey. They were being trained at Fort Ord for the battlefields of World War II. So downtown Monterey was jumping. She had a little button under the cash register to call the MPs in case there was any trouble with the soldiers. Um, but my father ran that restaurant, and then worked hard. Obviously, sacrificed a great deal. We used to invite some of those soldiers to our house for the holidays,
Oh, wow.
and and then after the war, my dad sold that restaurant and bought some property in Carmel Valley. And again, he planted a walnut orchard, and my brother and I worked again in that orchard. And as the trees grew older, my dad used to go around with a pole and hook and shake each of the branches. And my brother and I used to be underneath collecting the walnuts.
Mhm.
When I got elected to Congress, my father said, you've been well trained to go to Washington because you've been dodging nuts all your life.
Uh, we see where you get your sense of humor from.
So it's true. Anyway, that was my childhood. My parents, my brother and I were the first to go to college. We went to University of Santa Clara Jesuit School out here in California, both undergrad and law school. Uh, and I also went through ROTC, got my commission in the Army. I was able to get a deferment through law school for 3 years, but then I had to go in to serve for 2 years in the Army. And it was soon after I got out of the Army that I had to make a decision whether I practice law in Monterey, which my parents obviously wanted me to do, or go back to Washington. And I had a chance to go back to Washington as a legislative assistant to a senator from California. And that, and I remember telling my parents, "Oh, don't worry, I'll be there for a couple of years, and then I'll come back to Monterey." Well, 50 years later, I finally made it back to Monterey.
And what a beautiful place to return to, right?
Absolutely, it really is. It's
Yeah.
uh, it's wonderful here on the Central Coast. I had the chance to represent it in the Congress, and I'm really pleased. Sylvia and I are very pleased to be back. And by the way, we're back on that ranch that my dad had. I had to take out the walnut trees, which is too bad because it provided great lines. Um, I remember when I was leaving Washington, uh, when President Obama was announcing that I was leaving Washington, uh, and I said I was going back to our farm in Carmel Valley. I said, "I'm going back to work with a different set of nuts." I, I can't use those lines anymore because we planted a vineyard, which is still Italian. We now have Pinot Noir vineyard where the walnuts used to be, and this is going to be the third year. So we're waiting for a great crop, and we hope to produce Panetta Reserve.
Well, you know where to send some bottles. That's amazing.
Yeah. Uh, so I'm going to turn it over to Susan for a moment to also have this wonderful conversation with you.
Well, thank you. And Secretary, I guess one of the things I want to make sure that we touch on, because it's a lot of what our coalition is about, has to do with the importance of bilateral relationships, particularly between Italy and the United States. And we're all living in a time now where we realize the importance of international relationships. But Italy and the United States have been allies for a very long time. You have spent so much of your career in foreign policy and shaping foreign policy. I was hoping you could comment a little bit about that bilateral relationship and then why trade is so important as one of the underpinnings for an important bilateral relationship between any two countries, but in specific, the United States and Italy.
Well, because my parents both came from Italy, uh, and I mentioned the fact that they had this restaurant during the war. My nonno, my grandfather, came over to visit my mother, and it was just before the war broke out. And so while my parents were running the restaurant, my nonno basically raised me
Hmm.
and took care of me. That's how I learned my Italian, because otherwise I wouldn't be eating. My nonno only spoke Italian. Uh, and we as a result, we had a lot of relatives that were in Italy, particularly in Calabria. And we stay in touch with those relatives. We have three sons. Sylvia and I are very proud to have three sons, two lawyers and a doctor, by the way. And as you know, Jimmy is a member of Congress. My youngest son
Yeah.
is a member of Congress. Uh, and so all three of them, plus Sylvia and I, have been back to Italy to be very close to our families there. And uh, I really had a special place in my heart for Italy, not only as a result of family, but also because I love being Italian. I love the food. I love the music. I love the language. It's just a wonderful feeling to be Italian. So uh, I developed a lot of great relationships in Italy. Certainly when I was in Congress going there, but also when I was chief of staff to the
Mhm.
president. Actually went back with President Clinton, and you'll love this. He was speaking in Rome, and he asked me to interpret for him into Italian. Great speech. He was there, near the Forum in Rome,
Mhm.
and I had to interpret. And I remember the ambassador was very nervous about it. I said, "Don't worry about it." I said, "We'll fake it. We'll get through it." And so the president spoke, and I did the interpreting, and he introduced me, as the son of Italian immigrants. And then finally, we said, I was going to turn it over to the official interpreter. And when I did, the crowd said, "No, no, we want Panetta."
There you go.
So I never forgot that. Neither did President Clinton. Uh, but I had great relationships with the Italians, and I have to tell you, as director of the CIA, I had a great counterpart in Italy. We shared an awful lot of information together. Uh, we really do have a special relationship with Italy, not only because obviously a lot of Italians here in America, uh, but there's also just a special warm relationship that Italians have for the United States of America, and we, we had the ability to exchange important intelligence. We were working on the same issues. I developed a great relationship with him. I did the same thing as Secretary of Defense, working with the Minister of Defense. And also, we have some important bases in Italy, both in
Right.
the north and in the south. Naples is obviously a huge naval base
Yeah.
for the United States, so we have some very important bases. Italy has always been a great ally. I have to tell you, I never had any problems, anything I wanted, anything they wanted. We were able to work together. And besides that, when you go to Italy and you're Italian and your hosts are Italian, you never have a bad meal and
And that
you
is
never have a bad glass of wine. It was wonderful to be
tough,
able to sit
tough
down
job that somebody had to do it, right?
and enjoy great food and great company with them. So, answer your question is, I think one of the most important allies we have in Europe is Italy, because of that very special relationship.
Well, that's great to hear because obviously you know things that we don't know. So it's nice to hear that. Nice to hear that. So I guess the other thing I just wanted to talk about was, again, why trade relations are so important. Again, not only just between Italy, but that was sort of how we came to be as a coalition. But I think we're all very committed to understanding that trade relations are an important part of being allies.
Absolutely, it's incredible too because obviously we do have a great trade relationship, and Italy, for those of us from the south of Italy, which is a poorer area of Italy, uh, the reality was that a lot of my family members moved up north because that's where industry was. That's
Sure.
where there's a lot of commerce up there. And interestingly enough, the last time I was in Calabria, uh, Calabria is now a tourist attraction, particularly for Germans and others who go there to enjoy the beaches and the beauty of Italy. and so they're all really developing commercially.
Mhm.
Uh, a very strong economy both in the South and the North. But the North clearly, because of a lot of what they produce, uh, you know, the they're artisans. Italians are artisans. They make some of the most beautiful uh, wear, not only for women but for men,
Mhm.
and all of that is part of our trade relationship. And the Italians really do enjoy the ability to have that special relationship with the United States for their products because they know that that here in this country we have a special appreciation for the quality of
Yeah.
the goods that they provide.
Well
And
said.
so I I think it's really important. I'm a believer in free trade. I think it's really important, particularly in a global world. I mean,
Yeah.
I know there's some that argue, that against globalization. Well, excuse me, but globalization happens to be the reality of the world we live in. That's
Correct.
that's where we are. This world is going to continue to be a global world.
Mhm.
We're tied together because of communication, because of security, because of financial dependencies of one kind or another, uh, because of our diplomacy. As we see, uh, the whole NATO alliance now has come together and unified because of that very special relationship that we have. So I'm a believer that we have to engage with that world, and I would hope that we would now develop even better trade relations
Yeah.
with those countries because I think ultimately that's the best way not only to expose the American people to great products, but to also make them understand that we are interrelated
Mhm.
and that we have to be that way in the future.
Could not agree more, and thank you for being so eloquent in saying it. Before I turn it over to Lucy, I did want to let you know that, and I know Lucy's family's from Calabria, and my dad, who you knew pretty well, his family was from Montea. His father came over as a young boy from Calabria, so there must be something in that water or wine or something that
Yeah.
brings
Well,
over these great
as
Calabrese.
we all know, when we talk about Calabrese, we know that most of them have a testa dura,
Pastadora, that's
a
what,
hard head.
that's exactly. Isn't that whenever you tell somebody you're Calabrese, they say Testador, and you're like, okay.
you, you got it.
It's
And
so funny.
for those of us that had to serve in Congress, it wasn't a bad idea to have a hard head.
Oh man, isn't that super? Well, I'm going to turn it over to Lucy, but let me just say it's such an honor to see you again, and thank you for your lifetime of public service.
Thank you, Susan. It's great to see you.
Lucy?
Yes, and Leon, now in Calabria, don't we say capapost?
That's right.
It's a whole different
Yeah.
dialect.
Yeah. I mean,
Capapost.
in the real Italian, it's testa dura, but that's
In Calabrian, it's yes. And Leon, you, could you just before we go, because I know that you have devoted yourself, and Sylvia has, to your institute. Can you just briefly tell us a little bit about it?
yeah. I mean, my parents, like an Italian family, every Sunday we would get together for dinner. My brother and I, and myself, and Sylvia, and my brother and his wife, and we would have a great dinner with my father uh, and my mother, and both of them used to make very clear to both my brother and I that because of what this country gave them, the ability. I mean, I used to ask my parents, why did you come all of that distance to come to strange lands? Because they had family, they had friends. Why would you leave all of that to come to thousands of miles to a strange country? And I never forgot my father's answer, which was because your mother and I believe we could give our children a better life in this country, and that's the American dream. The ability to give our children a better life. And the other thing that my parents stressed was because of what the country gave them, the opportunity to be able to work hard and succeed and enjoy the American dream, that it was important to give back to the country. And they always stress how important it was to do that. I'm often asked about what got me into public service, and it was basically three things. Number one, my parents, who used to emphasize that it was important to give something back to the country. Two, the 2 years in the military, because I really understood how a cross section of America could come together because they believed in duty to country. And they worked together in order to achieve that mission that was important in the military. And thirdly, because of a young president who said, ask not what your country can do for you, but what you can do for your country. And that's really what got me involved in public service. I mean, I was a student body officer. I ultimately, obviously, got involved in public service. Sylvia and I, when we came back to California, I was a little concerned about young people being a little turned off about public service. And so both of us thought we would establish an institute to try to inspire young people to lives of public service. And that's what the Panetta Institute's all about. We have a number of courses. We have an internship program in Washington where we send students back to Washington to work in the California delegation, both Democrats and Republicans. We pay for everything so that, regardless of whether somebody has resources or not, they're going to enjoy that opportunity. I felt going back to Washington would open up their eyes to what public service is all about. We have a leadership program for student body officers. We have a lecture series that involves a student program to expose them to political leaders on both sides of the aisle. And we also have a program for law students. And it's interesting because what I'm doing with these law students is I'm trying to restore the art of governing. I mean, we remember what it's like to be able to govern, to work together.
Yeah,
That's a lost art now in Washington.
agreed.
And so what I'm doing with law students is we bring them here and I tell them, I'm going to get you select an issue, whether it's immigration or healthcare, budget, whatever. Give me the Republican position, give me the Democratic position, and then tell me what a possible compromise would look like. That's what we do. That's what we did in governing.
Yeah.
And it's amazing how young people, I'm trying to get them to understand that you have to be able to listen, to work together, and to ultimately find consensus. So I'm hoping that the Panetta Institute is planting the seeds for the future in future generations of leaders.
Oh, Leon, that's just remarkable and so needed. Good.
Mhm.
Thank you.
I would be remiss if I didn't ask you just this very last question. What is your favorite Italian dish?
Listen, my mother used to make a great plate of gnocchi.
Oh,
And she would do it for my birthday. She would do it for special occasions. And I just, they were soft, they were edible, they were delicious. And one time I asked my mother, teach me how to make gnocchi. And she did. Because I used to watch her as a kid, especially when you take the fork and you make the different gnocchi on the fork. I used to be entranced with that. So my mother taught me that. And now I make gnocchi. And I do the same thing with our boys, which is Christmas, Easter, special occasions.
Great.
I'll make a plate of gnocchi, and Sylvia makes the sauce. She's Genovese,
Okay.
so it's a little bit of a Genovese sauce, but it's great. And we do that for our boys. So without question, gnocchi is at the top of the list.
absolutely. Well, thank you. Thank you. It's good to know that. And it's good to know all of these wonderful things about you and your Italian heritage. We really appreciate very much, Susan and I, your joining us today. Secretary Panetta.
It's been my pleasure. I really enjoy the ability to see both of you. I mean, both of you are good friends, for a long time. But more importantly, you're both Italians, and You know, there is something special in that relationship. So I want to
Patsy.
give both of you. I can't do it on television, but or on Zoom, but give both of you a big hug and a big kiss and a big thank you, and give my regards to your families, please.
Thank you. You do the same.
Take care.
Thank you so much.